Hello again. I got some stuff from Michael's and thought I would share, in particular these stencils. They had a good coupon, and so I wanted to take advantage of that and get some the 10-minute cure resin, and decided to add a couple of things that had caught my eye a few months ago when I saw people showing some of the different stencils and stuff that Michael's had in store. Unfortunately, these were not available in my store, but so I had to order online. So just to jump right in, overall for the price, it's pretty good. Not a lot to complain about given the price, but there are some complaints. So, first off, the stencil with the birds, it would have been nice if the branch continued further down. Otherwise, it just kind of looks incomplete. Though, I don't think it's that problematic from the standpoint of the stencil, the way it's made. You could go in and trace out where the bird's tail is, and then take an X-Acto knife and trim out to continue the branch further down if you wanted to do that. Another option would be to cut an aperture in a piece of paper to go over top of this. I'm thinking, maybe a heart or an oval or something, and then cut around the tail of the bird, and then place the aperture over top so that you could then have the tail of the bird come through the aperture. So it's not a deal breaker. It just leads you to being a little more creative in using the tool. Something I do like about these is they do have etchings of the number of the stencil, and the back of the packaging shows what each of the stencils, the image looks like. That's kind of nice. But another complaint, some of the images online I saw, or some of the stencils online, they had some pretty decent images to get a good sense of what the stencils looked like used, but some of them not so much. It was basically you were looking at the images off the packaging. Now, this and up here are the only images that they have on the packaging. That's incredibly small. You can't see hardly nothing of that. So, I think they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, especially on these two stencils particularly, because they're really nice. So, I digress, packaging isn't always a company's first priority, I suppose, and given the price of these, they're not going to put a lot into the packaging. The other issue I found with the wreath is a few of the stencils, the image kind of indicates that the centers of some of the flowers are light, like a light yellow, but when you actually pull the stencils out to use it, that's not possible, because as you can see on these flowers here, the centers aren't masked off. So unless the centers will always have to be dark on these unless you mask it off. Otherwise, the color just kind of gets lost. The other option would be to maybe do embossing or something instead of using ink, which that's not a bad idea. So, like I said, some of these things is little workarounds that you can do that ameliorates the issue. The pink flower on the side here has a stencil to do the center, but you can see the center would have to be darker for it to show up. Here is the stencil for the center. And I did use a yellow to do that, but of course, it in real life, you can barely see a little bit of orange there, but you really can't tell that it's little dots. So, actually, hold on a second. While I'm here, I might as well just grab a darker color and do that. Hold on a second here. Let me get a small stencil brush. And something else to be aware of is, especially on this wreath, that different areas of each stencil sheet is something that you would want to color with a different color. As you can see here, these are yellow, this and this over here is yellow. I did these in pinks, and these centers here I'm going to do in a brown because it's darker. And now I didn't use small stencil brushes like this to do these. I used, actually, for the most part, these. And you can see that the images came out fairly decent for using these little finger blenders. But, okay, there we go. Now you can see what those centers actually look like. So that's something to be aware of with these. Again, I don't think that's a deal breaker. I don't know why they did that, because like for these flowers here, you can see that they do have a lighter center to them. You know, they did put the detail in these, so I just wish that they'd have done that with these here. The other thing is this right here. Hopefully you can see that. It's a light pink, and let me find the stencil for that. Turn it the right direction. That would be helpful. The let me get it lined up a little bit better so that it's not so distracting there. These pieces here should be a green color, because you can see that it's attaching this flower into these branches more or less. So, and then this looks more like a leaf than part of another flower. So, you would have to mask this off a little bit here to stencil that in the green. And actually, let's go back and do that. Just since we're here and I'm talking about these things, it'll make it a little obvious what I'm talking about. I might be able to get away with it using a really small stencil brush, so we'll see how that works. Sorry, trying to get this. There we go. Lined up again to the right position. Now I like to tap off a little bit. And this right here. Okay, that wasn't too bad. It's just something to be aware of. Of course, I haven't used brown on that brush previously, kind of discolored the green a bit, and I wasn't even using the same color green that I had initially anyway, but there, you can see that makes a little bit more sense that way. And in doing index of these types of supplies, I do this with layered stamps too. You might want to consider circling the different areas that are problematic and note that, put little notes out from the side stating what you need to do to address those issues when you use it in the future. So that's just something to consider, and when making little index sheets like this, that way when you go to use them again, you know what issues you have to address and have a better idea of how to use them. So for like this, I would indicate what stencil it is that is that problem. Let's see here. It was stencil number 2. So hold on. So there, that way you know when you use it what you need to do for that to not look odd. And then maybe for these here, what stencil sheet were those on? It was all from stencil sheet 5. Okay, and then let's see here. I don't know with this one that it's really even possible to do, because you don't want to leave white area in between. Maybe to what you could do is for that stencil to do make sure that you don't put as much color on the center, and do that a lot lighter, maybe. This was sheet 5, I think. Or no, sheet 3. Okay. There we go. Something else that might be helpful would be to maybe on the back, just to have a better idea of where each stencil is, go through, and that might be something that I do here. Since I'm already putzing around, I might as well, right? Oh, good gravy. Going to places I didn't intend to. Okay, well, I don't know what was on this brush before, but we'll find out, I guess, when it comes out at some bizarre color that I didn't intend. But sometimes it's kind of hard to get a sense of where the pieces lie for each stencil. So I'm thinking doing each stencil in one color. And I'm just kind of curious what it would look like anyway. But so that was one. This is two. And I found lining up the little bluebells on this side was kind of important. And then the layering of the centers on this side. And let's find a... go with faded jeans on this one. I'm having a hard time keeping these in place since I'm only gripping it down at the bottom here and don't have any tape on it. But I'm not needing this to be totally perfect. It just needs to be good enough. So there we go. I don't know. It might make out for a nice monochromatic look. Hadn't thought of that before now. That might actually come out looking halfway decent. Huh. Well, we'll continue on and see where it gets us. Let's see here. And this here, you're lining these areas here up. This lines up with the branches. These line up with the flowers. And then over on this side, you're lining up with the daisies. So those need to be lined up a little bit more. Now let's see here. What color should I use for that? Did Stormy Skies and Faded Jeans. Well, let's do Speckled Egg. That might be nice. Hold on a second, let me... Well, that was inconvenient. I just lost my bristles. Oh. I'll have to get some glue and glue those back in. Okay. Just trying to rub out some of the color that was on these before. This one I'd used with brown, so I'm likely to get some color contamination on this. You want to be a little careful on some of these to be sure that you don't, there's some areas that are a little flimsy, for lack of a better term, I guess. So you don't want to be too aggressive with your stencils that you end up bending parts of your stencils unnecessarily. So there we go. There's that one. Leatherwood probably wasn't my best choice there, but... or Speckled Egg, I mean. but I'm wondering if trying to use colors that look reasonably well together, that kind of make sense. So hold on a second, let me rub off this speckled egg a bit here. And we're going for stencil number 4 now. I don't know that weathered wood would be a good choice here. We'll see. I'm just thinking the centers of this flower over here might not come out very well. Let's see. Yeah, it comes out well enough. Okay. Okay. There we go. Move it on down the line. Get these down here done, which this isn't going to make much difference because I'm using a darker color on those and that's not going to show up very well there, but this is just something to get a good sense of where the different parts of the stencil fall, so you can see where everything that's one color is part of one stencil, and you can see where those parts of the stencil fall. So like if you're wanting all the greenery to be green, you know that you're looking at 2 or 3 different stencils to get that. You're going to have to move around the stencils quite a bit to accomplish that look. And then we'll go with... what am I doing here? I'm seeing the most areas to line up are right through there. And that looks all lined up there. Everything else looks lined up, so we put us down some chipped sapphire. Oh, piddle dinkies. Didn't mean to do that. That's where I'm saying don't get too aggressive with your stencils, because you could end up breaking off a piece of it that you need. There we go. Part of my issue with this is I'm not loading up the brush with as much ink because I'm in a hurry, and not that I need to be, but doing this on the fly and having to contend with the ink pad a little bit more to get the color on the brush. There we go. Okay. Making you wait, making you wait. There we go. I think that's kind of doable too, doing a monochrome top look. Thinking this was the weathered wood, this grayish color, that I should have used something else for. For that, because that's too gray. It kind of, let's see here. It was this layer here. Hold on, let me get a darker color out. Wondering, should I go with Prized Ribbon or Enchanted Mariner? I'm thinking Enchanted Mariner would match up with that color there a little bit better. So let's go with that. Okay. Might as well go all in, they say. In for a pint, in for a pound. Which seems kind of odd to say that, because it sounds like it's two different things. Like, if you're a little bit in, you might as well be all in. But a pint is a pound. So, if you're in for a pint, you already are in for a pound. Just now thought of that. Very strange. I don't get these inks out enough. I don't think. I need to use them more. I do find that they work particularly well for ink blending with stencils, though. Okay, that's a little bit better. That's more a harmonious green, but now I'm questioning the speckled egg color, because that's awfully gray looking too. So hold on, let's go back. What that was this here, and I'm wondering what color I've got that's darker but isn't going to overpower. Ooh, I don't think I used Chip Sapphire, but I think Chip Sapphire would be darker than Enchanted, and they're too similar in color, to be quite honest. Okay, well, I don't think I used Prized Ribbon. No, I don't think so. I did use Chip Sapphire. Never mind. We'll go with Prized Ribbon and see what this does for that. Can't believe I'm wasting my time on this. I do some of the stupidest things sometimes. Telling you, the difference between warm and cool colors really can make a huge difference in a project. So, I should have paid better attention to what I was doing initially, so that I didn't run into this problem here. There we go. Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense that way. Enchanted Mariner is a little... It's kind of a warmer tealy blue, but I think it's okay with this. Just rubbing this on my leg to get the ink off. I've got pants on, don't worry, and they're ratty pants at that, so I've been in the habit of wearing ratty tatty clothes in the craft room, because it never fails. I always end up with something on me somewhere. So, at least if I start out wearing the Ratty Tatty stuff, I'm not adding to the Ratty Tatty collection. But anyway, that gives you an idea of what that might look like if you did it in a monochromatic theme, which I think that's kind of got some possibilities there. I could see doing an ink blend of something that's kind of what am I thinking of? Twilightish looking, you know, soft pastel-y colors, and then doing this over top for kind of a autumnal, or not autumnal, twilightish kind of silhouette. And then doing, you'd have to use embossing folder probably. Not embossing folder, embossing ink. And do your sentiment or whatever in a metallic color or a lighter color. You could see doing it, and if you had a bunch of different colors, doing a bunch of different pastels and sprinkling them around over top of it, kind of have that magical look, and then do some little fairies in with it. Sounds like I'm designing a card right there, don't it? Anyway, I hope, I was not intending to do all that, but I think we both probably benefited a little from it, maybe. At least I did. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share with these. A couple of other things that I got in my Michael's orders. I got the cutting dies, the hearts and the stars. Something I did notice, though, that these are not, these are pretty thin dies, so I don't know how these would handle cutting heavyweight paper, like 110 pound. I suspect that if you're cutting just the shape out, it might be okay, but if you're cutting like a frame out that's kind of thin, that you might run into problems or issues with that. But I don't think that it would have any problem cutting just regular, plain, 60, 80 pound cardstock. I think these would be fine for that. If you're wanting something that's a little more heavy duty and less likely to bend and warp, because as thin as these are, I could see them warping some. You may want to check out Hero Arts. They have a nice collection of different shapes and infinity dies. And then the other thing I got was the stamp of, it's kind of like a notebook type stamp. And I do little disc bound journals and things for work and stuff. And I will take a sheet of copy paper and cut it 4x4, so that they're not, I cut it into 4 equal sizes or sheets, and then punch them to be bound into a disc binder. And I like the size, it's really good, but trying to print the lines on the paper and maintain borders and neatness and stuff is kind of difficult. So I was thinking that stamp might help with that. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, that's all I've got. I hope that my little review of these stencils and whatnots has been helpful. And I might look and see what other stencils they have that interest me. I know they had some cloud ones that I'd thought about, and seeing how these work out, I might get those and give those a try too, and see how I like them. Just more stuff to play with, really. And stuff to take up space. This stuff needs to start paying rent. I really do need to do something about that. Anyway, hope everyone has a good day. Bye!